ideas with colleagues now at such a challenging time. I hope you are all safe and well at home. And I hope that this webinar will give you some ideas, and also I hope that it'll be enjoyable as well. So let's get started. I've got out a little plan here so that you can see what is the content today for the webinar. So just very briefly, I'll talk about the importance of storytelling. I'm sure most of you already realize what a fantastic tool it is, especially now as we start to teach remotely and also to record stories. The types of stories that are good to use for online sessions, I'll be talking about that. I've also got my storytelling toolkit here next to me on my desk with all sorts of different bits and pieces for you to see, and mostly they're things that you can find around your home. I'll be talking about our faces as well, the way that we express ourselves through stories visually, but also I'll be talking about our voice. I'll be sharing a short story, also a little bit of non-fiction as well, which can be lovely as well online, and a couple of real-life anecdotes, because when we share our own stories to our students, I think they enjoy that a lot as well. Then I'll be giving you an idea about a 7-word story, which is a way for your students to be the storytellers. As Emily said, we'll be showing a little video at the end of the session with some storytelling sound effects that you can do. And finally, if we do have time, perhaps we've got time for some questions and some answers. Okay, great. So let's get started. So storytelling has earned its place as the most important tradition that humans possess. Every story contains a lesson to instruct the audience, and through those instructions and those beautiful images, we can teach love, we can reinforce information or cultural values, and we can share memories. We can also learn how to forgive, to be fair, to embrace change, and above all, to evolve as human beings. And ever so much at the moment, I think the story helps our young learners with their social emotional development. And you know how stories are very deep. So hopefully I'll be able to give you some very practical examples of those types of stories. This is an image of our most important people in our lives right now, right? Our students. And as we work with them online, it's important to remember a few special things. When we're working with them, we're going to keep the connection. Yes, what we had in our classrooms, we can now try to keep that connection going with our online classes. And also, I think for children, it's very important for them to keep some sort of routine, even though they're at home all the time right now. Routine is very important. So having the possibility of our online class going into that family's home can help them with their daily structure, I think, if it's possible. And also the quality of what we put in our classes when we're organising them shows how much we care, right? And that includes the choice of the story, perhaps, that you might take. We can also smile and laugh together, If this is a very stressful time for a lot of people, a little bit of humour, a way to relax, a giggle can be very, very good for children and for us alike, right? And also, we're going to keep the language alive through our lessons. So you can see that there are a lot of ingredients in our online classes. It's not just about the language, right? As you know. So this is the first question for you. Have you been using stories in your online classes? And if so, what type of stories have you been using? Let's have a look. Some people yes, some people no. Simple ones, very simple ones, exactly. Yes, short stories. Yeah, exactly. Oh, lots. Lots, yes and no. The chat box is going really quickly. Okay. Very simple ones, yes. Part of the reason that we will use very simple stories for our online classes for young learners is their attention span. Can you imagine it's different for them being in the classroom, having our physical presence, as it is to watching a screen? And you will see, I think, for very young learners, the maximum we can have an online class is like 30, 40 minutes maximum, because they start to yawn and they'll start to get dispersed. I think for the under sixes, for example, it's even shorter. So let's have a look. What type of story can we use? So as many of you have said, very correctly, that yes, the stories have to be short. And that's why some of the stories in the anthologies in the lower levels are very nice, because they are very short and sweet. As I said earlier, we can also use non-fiction stories, and I'll give you a couple of ideas of how to do that. Stories with props. If you were in my last webinar, you'll see that I'm the type of storyteller who has all sorts of bits and pieces, not just a book necessarily to tell a story. And perhaps if some of you don't have your material from school and you're at home teaching remotely, then little bits and pieces are very important, and I'll also show you what you can do with that. And lovely face-to-face stories, little anecdotes that you have about what's been going on in your house, just to share some daily stories with your students. So I'm going to start then by showing you my storytelling toolkit. And I'm pretty sure that most of these things, most of them, you will have at home. And so too will your students. So dressing up clothes. So if you don't, any clothes will do. Perhaps you've got a funny hat or an interesting shawl or something. But because I have children myself, I also have things like, I also have things from Halloween. So if you're going to tell a story about a witch, perhaps this kind of hat might be great. And with some a little bit of sound effects, and the hat can be very nice if you're going to tell a story about a witch. I've also got this little hat, which is like a tiger. So this would be the hat if I was going to tell this story, the tiger who came for tea, then I would use this hat to tell the story. Yeah. Another thing I have here is the ears. Yes. So for animal stories, this is a really simple thing. Here where I live in Brazil, you can buy these little Alice bands, and then you can just make your own set of ears depending on the animal. Here's a little piggy. Yeah. So quite simple and quite easy to have all these different things. Any dressing up clothes make the story more interesting for the students. Musical instruments. Now, not everybody has musical instruments in their house. Something as simple as a pot with a bit of rice. So you've got some percussion. You can have perhaps the sound of rain, the sound of the sea waves coming in. So this is a very simple thing. Another one I love are the two coconut halves, right? So you can do so you can make your sound effects, right? Other things I have, let me just show you one that I love that's a very Brazilian one. This is called a heco heco here, and it makes lots of different noises, but it's very simple and handmade. And this is the noise it makes. And also you can do like creaky floorboards. Or or you can do a door opening in a scary story. Yeah, so wherever I go, I'm always looking for little instruments. This was a toy that my children had when they were very little, but it's lovely. Yeah, so there's lots of different things you can have, but as I've said, if you don't have instruments, you can just have a little pot of rice, can go a long way. Another lovely thing as well is to have some sort of toys or dolls or puppets. For example, I have this little sweet little rabbit, and it's a toy, but you can use it like a puppet. Yes. Yeah. So it's lovely. So if I have, for example, a story about rabbits, then I might use a story about rabbits. I might use this little rabbit toy to tell the story. Yeah. What else have I got here? Let me see. Yes, for example, you might have some little plastic animals in your house. So they're very nice to tell animal stories with. I think pretty much everything. And I'm going to show you also how to use some kitchen utensils as well. Another lovely thing are objects from nature, sticks, stones, wood, leaves. Wood is very nice because you can bang. You can bang sticks together, you can move stones. I like a lot of the natural materials as well. So a wealth of things you can use for your stories. Bottles, glasses, kitchen items. I will be telling you the story about the emperor later, and the emperor can be a bottle dressed up, you will see in a little while. So I don't think there are any limits to what you can do and what you can use in a story in terms of your household's equipment. And one other thing is to use cloth in different sizes. I always have lots of different colours and tones of cloth, so you can use it as a background, you can use it as a cloak to put around you, you can use it for some beautiful sky. Cloth is amazing because it just does so many different things, right? Okay, let me move on. Yes, here you see I told the story of the three little pigs using wooden spoons, yeah? So they're here by my side. Wooden spoons, so this would be the pig with the house of straw. This would be the pig with the house of sticks. And this would be the pig with the house of bricks. And this that I have here is a nutcracker, and I thought it was very wolfy. Yeah, so you can find objects in your house that have characteristics of the characters in the story, and I thought this was very wolfy, that one. If you would like to see the full story, underneath here you can see the link to a YouTube channel that we have for our school where we put our stories, so feel free to check that out later. Let's say also that you're going to, what would you do for this story? This is like a little story about children playing in the forest school. What sort of clothes would you use to tell this story? Yeah, exactly. A raincoat, or you can just simply put up an umbrella to tell the story. Very, very simple, but it just makes things different, especially for young learners. Yeah, camping stuff, umbrella, Mackintosh, exactly. You know, it brings an element of fun and enjoyment and fantasy, I think, to your stories, right? And yes, I saw somebody wrote there, to a certain extent, you do have to be like a little bit of an actor or an actress when you're going to tell your story, okay? Now, let me talk a little bit about the teacher's voice. This is our most important tool for teaching and obviously for telling stories too. And we need to look after our voices. That's why it's not good to have to be shouting in class and raising our voice. For stories, the first thing I think that's important is that you listen to your recorded voice. Listen to the tone of your voice. Listen to the variation of your voice. You can see that I said, you know, when you listen to yourself, you will hear everything that you do with your voice. So it's important to get to know that sound and to make sure that it sounds interesting and varied for your students, because nobody wants to listen to a story all on the same level and it's very boring and you just go on and there's no intonation and it's all that. Nobody wants to listen to a story like that. They'll fall asleep, won't they? All right. So breathing is important, yes. Breathing before you start the story, your breath can tell all sorts of wow, different things in your story, the way you use your breath. And also, I think it's important as well, when you're calming your students down before you tell the story, to get them to breathe as well. And I will give you an example of that in a second. So it is important to speak with enthusiasm, right? We can hear that in somebody's voice. If I speak like this and I'm not smiling, it's one way of speaking. But if I speak like this, you can hear that I'm smiling and I'm saying something with enthusiasm, right? Yeah, it can be very subtle, but it is important. Also, to project your voice. Yes, your students want to hear every single detail of the story. And I know how difficult it is to tell a story in another language, because I also tell stories in Portuguese. And sometimes I make mistakes and sometimes my pronunciation isn't great. So if I tell the story in a nice, slow, careful, energetic way, then it's better for my students to understand what I'm saying too. We have to vary the pace and the pitch and the volume of our delivery. Okay? Sometimes we might be talking like really quickly, and then sometimes very slowly, you see? We need to articulate some of the words, right? Especially if you're going to tell a story with phonics. There are lots of stories with lovely rhymes, and we never want to swallow the end of the word at the end of the sentence. So rhyming stories are great if you articulate the words carefully. And then the compelling power of the pause. Do you know what I mean? The pause is a very essential ingredient. And we can also use different voices for each character or narration. And I know that some teachers think, oh my goodness, it's just the best I can do is actually just get the book and tell the story. But the more you get into storytelling and the more confident you feel, I think the more you want to test out different things and have a go at something new. So using voices, perhaps not if you're a beginner storyteller, but using voices when you get a bit more confident can be lovely. And let me just give you an example. So let me see, oops, I've gone to a different mode, sorry about that. Oh gee, I've pressed the wrong button. Okay. So, once upon a time there lived a witch. Yes, the scariest witch in the village. So I've read that with my regular voice. Or I can read it with a witch's voice. Once upon a time there lived a witch. Yes, the scariest witch in the village. Or I can use two different voices. Once upon a time there lived a witch. Yes, the scariest witch in the village. So I can go back and forth with my narrator's voice and with my character's voice. It's not that difficult once you have a go. Now, also, I think, I've done it again, sorry. Also, I think it's interesting if you think about your characters and think about the quality of the voice. So, for example, with the three little pigs, perhaps the voices are all different according to their personalities. So, for example, the first one, I'm going to make a house of straw. I'm going to make a house of wood. I'm going to make a house of bricks. So perhaps the more intelligent pig, perhaps he has a very sort of more serious voice. Yes? So the voices will depend on the type of characters. So here's the little story warm-up that I have. This is what you can use before you tell the story. And also it's quite good, I think, for getting you, the storyteller, to be calm as well. It goes like this. I'm sorry. Here's a story, I will tell you how. Lots of things for us to see. Let's get ready. Now. And we can vary that pause there. Yes, we can repeat that word. Let's get ready. Let's get ready. Let's get ready. Now. So the ... can be a way of giving children a moment just to get ready for the story. In this photo, you can see draw a picture. Perhaps you could get your students to draw a picture of what they look like when they're ready to listen to a story. That's a very good technique in reinforcing the behavior that you want from your students to tell stories. Okay, so here we come to the first short story. It's The Empty Pot. And probably I would start this story by asking my students, well, what can you see? Who is that man? Where is that man? What's he wearing? What's behind there? What's he doing? What can you see? Yes, so they would come with a wealth of different answers. And probably for this one, I might just get a piece of red cloth, because I'm going to tell the story from the emperor's point of view. So I might just choose a couple of colours that I can see the emperor has and use them to tell the story. This is the emperor of China. He's old, so I would give him an old voice. I want to find a new emperor. Plant a seed. I have a seed here. Plant a seed. If you can grow a beautiful flower, you are the new emperor. Ping's mum, dad and brother help him. I've got soil. I've got water. I've got a pot. I'm sad. I want a flower. The children have got flowers for the emperor, but the emperor isn't happy. Ping is sad. I've got a flower. It's blue. I've got a flower. It's red. My pot is empty. The seeds are cooked. They can't grow. You are honest, Ping. You are the new emperor. There, you see? Now, when I did this very simple story, I thought about ways that we could use things in our house that the students could use to retell the story themselves. Now, I've used bottles for slightly older children, so perhaps not bottles for young learners, but you can see that you've got in your house all sorts of different bottles and pots, and each one can represent a different character in the story, you can see. And also, when you label the characters, it makes it very clear for your students. Can you see? Yes? You have the emperor, the seeds, the pot, and you also have the flowers inside the pots for the children that brought their flowers to the emperor, right? Do you think that's possible? Yes, another thing that you can do, and this is lovely for your students because most of our students have got toys, right? And they can basically find a toy that they think looks like Ping or represents the emperor, and they can use their toys to act out. I love when I'm working online is to get my students to bring things to the class. So get them to bring a toy, get them to bring an object, have a little bit of show and tell, right? So it's lovely to use these things for students to retell stories so that they are the storytellers. Okay, great. Let me just see where I am. Okay. Now this is going to be, this is a non-fiction story. It's in level 3 of the anthologies, and it's about the Culture House. And again, before I go into the words of this non-fiction story, I would get my students to tell me all sorts of things. First of all, I would use this visual thinking routine, see, think, wonder, to get my students to say what they can see first. So they might say things like, oh, I can see houses and flats. I can see windows. And then I would ask them, well, what do you think about that? Look at that. What do you think? Oh, I think I can see a park. I think it's winter. I think it's cold. And then I would ask them, what do you wonder? Oh, and you're going to get their thinking to go a little step further by asking them that. And perhaps they'll say things like, I wonder what's inside that funny building. I wonder what's in the windows. I wonder who lives there. So you are first exploring the image before you get into the words. And here are the words of the little non-fiction. Hi, I'm Ella. This is the Culture House in Copenhagen. It's a community centre where you can have lots of different lessons. This is not in the book, but when there's any reference to any country or town or city, I love bringing a little map so that students can situate where Denmark is and where Copenhagen is. I think we have a teacher, or we have some teachers from Sweden, perhaps not from Denmark, but I would like my students to see the city on a map so that they can situate the non-fiction story. And then on to the next page. The building is really cool. Let me show you. The first thing you see is the entrance. You can walk up the stairs or you can go rock climbing. It's great fun. So when we choose a non-fiction story, we have to find something that's interesting and something that also connects to their world as well. So hopefully something that they do, an image of other children doing something. And then I would ask them questions about the girl who's talking in the non-fiction story. Who is Ella? How old do you think she is? Why is she telling us about the Culture House? Yeah. So there is a lot of information and a lot of things we can do. And probably for very young learners, you will probably have to use a little bit of their first language to discuss something, so that as they tell you things in their first language, you can transform what they say into English, into little chunks of language, right? We do that a lot with our students. Why do we do that? Because little children, they think in their first language, and then we keep the language that we're using with them flowing. So here in Brazil, if a student of mine says, "Meu Deus, eles estão escalando," and I'll say, "Yes, they're climbing, look." Okay, so we always keep the language going and never negate use of L1, of the first language, right? Okay, this is another little story. It's about a boy who has a toothache, and the language presented in this story is about appearances. And when I wrote this story, I also had some of these little simple pegs in my house. And so I made a little peg doll of Pascal Dent. He's a little French boy, and he's the protagonist of the story. And I think when you have physical objects as part of your stories, you also give a chance for students to do the same, yes? So in that case, I am talking about different appearances. Maybe they have a doll, or maybe they have something that they can make to talk about appearances. And when they have the physical object in their hand as you tell the story, it's like they become part of the story, yeah? They become more connected, I think, sometimes to the narrative. So this is an opportunity, especially when you're going to retell a story a number of times, okay? You might have seen this puppet in the last webinar. It's a puppet just made of a piece of knotted cloth. Very, very simple, and also something that the students can move around. It's very flexible, so it can jump and it can fly, and it can sit on your shoulder and have a little chat with everybody. Yes. So having a little cloth puppet is also extremely useful. Do you think that you can use some of those things? Do you have little bits and pieces around your house? Have you used your objects in your stories so far? You have, yes. Great. Lots of different things, definitely. Oh, brilliant. Sometimes, yes, sock puppets, that's another lovely one. Yes, excellent. Great. Oh, I think when you love teaching children, you always want to do something. The other day, I made this little ladder, because in our garden we have fairies, and the fairies are also in quarantine, and they had to bring up a lot of things into their little fairy nest. So I made this little tiny ladder out of sticks from the garden. I think the possibility of enchanting our students is also, you know, it's just a lovely thing, isn't it? So moving on then to my couple of little anecdotes that I wanted to share with you. And these are both things from my two daughters. I have two daughters, Emily and Flora. They're young ladies now, but when they were little, I used to tell them a lot of stories. And this particular one about the earache cleaners was an image that I always got them to conjure up in their minds when they had earache. They used to do a lot of swimming. Here I live on an island, and it's surrounded by lots of different beaches. So they were always in the sea or in the swimming pool. And, you know, little children, they get earache. So the story of the earache cleaners was that there are these little tiny people that when you have earache, they go up into your ear, and first of all, they spray your ear with this lovely warm water. And then with the softest little cloth, they start to clean inside your ear, and they clean away all the red sore bits up into the corners, down here, round and about. And they pass another little bit of cool, warm water to take away all the earache. And you know what? Every time I told my daughters this story, it calmed them down. They were able to think about that image in their minds, And it was one of those beautiful things from our family childhood. So, mummy, tell me about the earache cleaners, even when they didn't have an earache. And the other one about the monster under the stairs. We have a cupboard under the stairs in our house. And when my daughter was about 6 or 7, she was really scared of going up the stairs because she thought there was a monster that lived under the cupboard. And so to help her work with that fear, if you like, we sent a letter to the monster. She's written in Portuguese, para o monstro. And she even imagined what the monster looked like. So she had this little back and forth letter to the monster. So she would write a letter, and she said here in this one, "Dear monster, can you tell me what you look like? I need to know." And then she said, "Please leave the answer in the garage." Yeah, because she was really scared. Anyway, these letters with the monster under the stairs went back and forth until finally the monster said, "Well, I'm not coming out because I'm really scared of little girls." And so that was the end of her being worried about going up the stairs. Just a little anecdote. So when you have a nice little story about your children or your students or your family, or about when you were little, share it with your students. Use a photograph, use an image, use an object. And I think those real stories are fantastic, right? Stories from our childhood too. Yes, some children like to draw monsters. There are lots of different ways, and you know what? Storytelling can be very therapeutic if you choose the right story. Okay, so I was going to tell you about the 7-word story. And this is a very simple technique where you can make your students into the storytellers, okay? And all you need to do it is 7 words. So choose any word with 7 letters that your students know. Maybe your students can choose the word themselves. Here are some examples. Morning, welcome, dancing, penguin, history, England, pumpkin, that might be at Halloween. So you're going to ask them to include some objects and some doing words. So you get your word. I chose the word Sundays. Let me write it here. I'm going to just put the whole word down here. Oops. So you get them to write the word vertically and think of a word for each letter of that word. So S, sitting, U, under, N, no, D, day, A, alligator, Y, yummy, and S, sunny. So they'll always choose words that they know. Yes. So obviously you don't really want to choose 7 words, 7-letter words that are too difficult, but it's also nice for some students to get a challenge, okay? So here are the words, and now I'm going to show you how you tell a 7-word story. Basically, you're going to use those words. You can change the order. They don't have to be in the order of the actual word, and you can repeat them as many times as you want, but you're going to do just those 7 words for the story. So this is how it would work. Sunny, sunny. Sunny day. Sitting, sitting, sitting. Under. Alligator, alligator, alligator. Yummy, 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 yummy. Yummy, yummy, yummy. No! And there you have a very simple story in 7 words. Yes, it's a very creative way to use words in a story. It conjures up all sorts of different images. Yes, it can be funny. And also, I think it's very accessible. And I do love when my students become the protagonists of the class, right? That's also part of the job. All right. Okay, so let me tell you about an app that I've been using, and I'm still learning how to do it. And the only way to learn how to use an app is using it. And it's an app called Clips. And it allows you to record not only yourself with your voice, you can also record the image in the book and voice over to read the story. And it has all sorts of different resources in it. You can have it, and then what you do is you record your story, or you can use it in your online session as a recorded thing, or what I've been doing is I've been sending the story out to the students after an online session. This particular story we used in our school after the students had been learning about shapes. And we did shapes around the house and shapes in the sky and shapes all around the world. And we had this story to introduce, to sort of go together with the regular course book class that they'd had. So we're going to show you a part of the video of it. And part of it where we used some sound effects also to show how to do that. Emily, can you show the video, please?
Is called How to Catch a Star. The story was written by Oliver Jeffers. Ele também fez todos os desenhos nessa história sobre estrelas. Once there was a boy, and the boy loved stars very much. Every night the boy watched the stars from his window and wished he had one of his very own. He dreamed how this star might be his friend. They would play hide and go seek, hapidu, skondi, skondi, and they would take long walks together. The boy decided he would try to catch a star. He thought that getting up early in the morning would be the best. Beng beng sedu, because then the star would be tired from being up in the sky all night. So the next day he set out at sunrise. But he could not see a star anywhere. Nenhuma estrela. He sat down and waited for one to appear. He waited and he waited. And ate lunch. And waited. And after dinner, he waited some more. Finally, just before the sun was about to go away, he saw a star.
Okay, so I just wanted to tell you that sometimes when I'm going to tell a story, especially for my younger learners, I do tend to slip in little tiny sentences in Portuguese so that I keep my listeners connected to the story. And I don't think there's any problem at all in doing that. A little tiny phrase that connects to them again, because they're listening to a story in another language, they're seeing images, they're trying to work it out. So when you pop in a little tiny bit of their own language, it connects them, you know. So I often do that so that I can keep my students focused and engaged in the story. Okay, Emily, let's have a look at the part with the sound effects now, please.
Sound effects. Os efeitos sonoros. And that was the story, How to Catch a Star. I hope you like it. See you soon.
Of you on your mobile phones, perhaps you weren't able to see the video or hear it. It's all there for you to look at length afterwards. I just wanted to share that because I think it's very doable. And I think that the apps that we have available these days can really help us, especially in this idea for remote teaching. Yes? Okay. So let's just recap now on what we've been speaking about in the last 15 minutes, okay? We talked about to choose a simple short story, as online sessions for young learners cannot be too long, right? And I think most of you are already doing that, which is great. Think about what you can use to enliven your story by using simple objects you have around the house, right? And it can be very funny too. Think about the quality of your own voice and experiment using different voices and characters and narration. Ask your students open-ended questions to ignite their curiosity. What can you see? What do you think about that? What do you wonder? And use the 7-word story technique to make your students the storytellers. And also, I really recommend trying to use some sort of app to record your stories, maybe Movie Maker or iMovie, but I love this idea of the clips one because we can do it on our phones, so we can actually do it anywhere, which is great. I'd also just like to tell you that on the National Geographic Learning site you have access to lots of different blogs. Here are 3 of the blogs that I've written connected to storytelling and using stories in your classroom. So if you would like to read a little bit more about storytelling, please feel free to go in and have a read of those blogs. And just before we move on to the questions and answers moment, can I just say, even though we're far away from our students, teachers really matter. Whether you're near or far, you are irreplaceable. So don't forget that. Thank you for watching this webinar. And now, if anybody has any questions they would like to ask, I think we've got a couple more minutes. Let's see if anybody has any queries or doubts or something they would like to share. Oh, thank you so much. Do you have any tips for creative writing with graders 1 to 3? That's an excellent question. Tips that I would have, for example, about creative writing is I think it's always interesting for, if you're going to get your students to write, before you actually give them the language that they might need to do that, I would give them an image, a beautiful image, an illustration, a photograph, a piece of music. First of all, I would build up their curiosity and creativity about the subject you want them to teach. So, for example, if you want them to talk about something they do in their daily lives, perhaps bring some objects, right? A towel, a toothbrush, a comb for your hair. Bring them something so that it connects to what you want them to write about. If you want them to write about food, bring them images of beautiful food from around the world, okay? I always like to do that. How can I find voices for my characters? That's a really good question too. Well, I think if you look at the face, for example, let me give you an example quickly here. Who have I got? Okay, let's say I've got the rabbit and the mermaid. For me, the rabbit looks like a little boy. Yeah, I'm a boy. So I would have like a kind of, yeah, young boy's voice. And for the mermaid, obviously she's a girl. So perhaps I would have a very kind of sweet little sea voice, very mystical and very watery for when the mermaid is talking. So look at the characteristics, what that character looks like, think about the age, and then I think you'll be able to find the voices for your characters. Yeah. How to engage with kids who are a bit older. This is a really good question too. In our school we have students 9, 10, 11, 12. Recently I told them a story about my pet. I have a dog. So I made a PowerPoint presentation about my dog, and you can make it like a descriptive text about your dog, my dog's name, my dog's age, my dog likes to do this and that, or perhaps talking from the dog's point of view. Oh, yes, I like Lucy, she's okay. Yeah, she gives me food. So try and find something that will relate to those students. I think pets is a great thing. It's good for all ages. And also for those sort of tweens, pre-teens, it has to be a little bit cool and a little bit funny. So perhaps you're going to tell stories using comic books or a comic strip. Yes? Okay. Oh, there's so many questions. How can we adapt these activities to students with, I don't know, is that online students? I didn't get the whole of that question. So up to what age? You know what? Obviously, some of the things are for children, yes? I wouldn't perhaps use this rabbit for my teenagers. You know, they might think, oh, that's too babyish. But there are ways of adapting materials and even, you know, the voice and the choice of your story according to your students' age range, yes? So, I mean, I've used a lot of these things. This one in particular, the sound of the grasshopper, I use that in my class with my teenagers. When I ask them, I say, oh, who would like to read out loud? And there's a deathly silence. And I play the grasshopper and they burst into laughter. So a lot of these things can be adapted for all ages. Okay, so keeping students engaged. Like I said, it's bringing an essential, interesting element into your story, using different props to do that, maybe a bit of music, maybe a warm-up rhyme or a song. And keeping them engaged, it also might include using their language from time to time, just slipping in a little phrase, yeah? Great. I will definitely use them. Great. Yeah, for teenagers, one particular type of story I like using for teenagers are biographical stories, because they're very inspiring and uplifting, and there are lots of different biographical stories that you can use. There are some amazing teenagers right now all over the world, so that you can tap into those stories, right? So I would use biographical stories. What is your personal favourite type of story? My favourite type of story is usually a folk tale. My favourites are the Magic Cooking Pot and the Great Big Enormous Turnip. Yeah. Okay, so that's all the time we've got now for the questions. Let me just pass you over to Emily. Before I do that, just let me say thank you so much. It's always a huge pleasure. I'm just over the moon with all the different teachers and countries, and I really thank you from the bottom of my heart. And I hope that the stories in your online classes will bring really good energy to all your students. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lucy, for this wonderful, interactive, entertaining session. All the respondents in the chat box are just really wonderful. We're so glad you could all share it with us today. Just a few notes as we wrap up here. And one note about all those wonderful questions, Lucy will be writing a follow-up blog post to go on that In Focus blog that she shared a little bit earlier too. And we're going to try to answer as many of the questions as we can in there. I'm going to send Lucy those so they can inform her blog post that she will write. So many of those will not go unanswered if you did not get an answer in the Q&A for your questions, and I'll try to answer a few here too. I did see a few people asking about where they can get these stories and where the stories were from that Lucy shared. I do just want to mention that many of them were from the Look anthologies. Lucy is the Look anthology author. And for Look is a 7-level series for young learners of English. And every level of Look does have an anthology book with 6 stories in it. And there's also activities included to check comprehension for even more reading practice for your young learners. So if you're interested in learning more, we will be sending you an email to learn more about Look. And you can always learn about it on our National Geographic Learning website too. I just wanted to share that with you all. As we wrap up here, I know there were questions about the certificate, the recording, getting the slides, and the link. We will be sending all of that material to you. We'll be sending it in a follow-up email. You can expect that in just about 5 business days. So don't worry if you haven't received it right after this session. Give us 5 business days and we will email that to you. And thanks everyone for joining. I just want to remind you we do have many upcoming webinars, whether you're a teacher of young learners, of teens, of adults, or in the college classroom. We have a full schedule and we're trying to gear a lot of them towards the online classroom right now because we know that's the reality that a lot of you are faced with, and we want to support you in as many ways as we can. So we hope you can join us again. We do have one on Tuesday about bridging the gap between home and school. And that will be, I think, really great for teachers of young learners trying to help parents as they um, help with teaching students online too and help teachers out. So definitely be sure to attend that if you can. It's by one of Lucy's colleagues, Claire, she's in Brazil as well. So we hope you can join us then. And just one more note, we do have another session of this same webinar. Be sure to tell your colleagues if they couldn't join us. It will be at 4 p.m. Boston time, where I'm based, which is 5 p.m. Where Lucy is. So we hope any of your colleagues who couldn't join us now can join us then. So thank you. I'm seeing again a really great outpouring in the chat box. I'm going to direct everyone to a feedback survey now. We'd love to hear what you thought of the session, and we really hope you can join us again soon. So thanks so much for being part of the community, and I hope everyone's staying safe and happy teaching. Bye everyone. Bye Lucy.